40 million vanished under Julian Cross's signature, but Evan Hart proved the signature impossible seconds before a car came for them. 3 hours earlier, Evan stood in Cross Meridian's blue-lit audit room, studying 4 transfers of exactly $10 million each. He refused the system's red conclusion banner and opened the underlying records instead. Behind him, Julian Cross entered without counsel, stopped well outside Evan's reach, and called Treasury. "Freeze every outgoing payment, no exceptions, not even mine." The order cut through the room on speaker. Evan turned from the monitors. Julian was taller than his file photograph suggested, broad-shouldered in a tailored navy suit, his expression composed despite the accusation glowing across 4 screens. He placed his phone, laptop, security token, and executive access card on the nearest empty table. "My devices are yours," Julian said. "My office, too. You report to the independent fund trustees, not to me. If anyone here obstructs you, document it. You understand those approvals carry your digital signature?" "Yes. And freezing the company won't reverse what already left." "No, but it may keep the same person from taking more." That answer earned Julian no trust, but it earned him Evan's full attention. Evan rolled his white sleeves higher beneath his charcoal waistcoat and sealed each device in a numbered evidence sleeve. Julian watched the process without asking what Evan expected to find. Most executives tried to fill silence with innocence. Julian seemed willing to let evidence speak first. The Green Horizon Fund held public money intended for community batteries, municipal solar systems, and grid upgrades in low-income districts. At 9:10 that morning, its balance had been $40 million higher. By 9:24, 4 payments had gone to 4 unfamiliar companies. Each had passed Treasury review, compliance review, and final executive approval under Julian's certificate. On the surface, it resembled 4 authorized purchases. Underneath, it resembled one instruction repeated 4 times. "Who can use your signing certificate?" Evan asked. "Only me under normal controls. In an emergency, the board chair can request reissuance through disaster recovery." "Eleanor Voss?" Julian's gaze sharpened, but he did not take the invitation to accuse her. "That authority exists to keep the fund operating if I'm incapacitated. I have no evidence she used it." "You're careful. You need facts from me, not a suspect chosen for my convenience." For one brief moment, Evan felt something disturb the clean distance he preferred between himself and a subject. Not belief, recognition. As an omega in rooms crowded with powerful alphas, he had learned how quickly courtesy could become another instrument of control. Julian neither crowded him nor softened his voice into false gentleness. He simply gave Evan room to work, and accepted that the room might destroy him. The glass door opened. Eleanor Voss entered in a structured black suit and ivory blouse, a small silver brooch fixed precisely at her collar. Her cool blue eyes moved from Julian's sealed devices to the transaction paths on Evan's screens. "The city expects an answer before markets open," she said. "Mr. Hart, your mandate is to protect the fund. We cannot do that while pretending the obvious is complicated." "The obvious is an allegation," Evan replied. "It is Julian's signature." "It is a record claiming to be his signature." Voss's severe expression did not change. "A distinction without practical value. Suspend him, preserve the remaining assets, and contain the disclosure. A prolonged internal hunt will only damage the projects this fund was created to serve." Julian stayed near the door, leaving Evan the center of the room. "His mandate is not containment," he said. "It is a complete audit." "You are hardly neutral," Voss told him. "No, which is why I've surrendered my authority." Evan saw irritation pass through her eyes so quickly it might have been a reflection. Voss turned back to him. The cacophony rounds of Nabiers of first, the Milsbergs make it to speech, formed the screen to guess the eating light, and scenes the Camilleter Toda waking stare that sharbing a little Buffland, and Celeste Avenue, and that it is, until I stellar in the slunk, but I run getting, the overrun choir, and outside entirely steeps. Being always a mat, and will be good, think a slackbation. It is resplex by supplying a bit of a doblik, at very thing as to this, pseudolessly underspied, the rest of the clairsmication of Drulius, sending to the sleal cladgage when he traply fasks it, and I still will see what's like that Elvernet. I want a pable locally. If you class, this is entirely deal. Then I'll use the hours before dawn, Evan said. Until I finish, neither you nor Julian decides my conclusion. Voss held his gaze, perhaps weighing whether Omega deference could still be summoned by expectation alone. Evan gave her none. At last she inclined her head and left, her heels striking the corridor in measured beats. Julian waited until the door closed. "Do you want me gone as well?" "Yes." He moved immediately. "And stay available," Evan added. Julian paused. "Of course." The lack of argument unsettled Evan more than resistance would have. "You know cooperation can be staged." "I know." "Then why make it so easy?" Julian looked back at the four glowing paths. "Because $40 million belonged to people who trusted us to build something with it. Whether I filked with injusted, she wots his grady as wise. Fable Jen, wash the guver, stopping this little hot. It is one piece heavily produced. My heart is swided before I power up this ruinment. What I burfist have, fably. Still asking it, I will pretty much discuss what I will still slowly slightly speak. We can be, Vaughan. Game-backed play stands. Oh, the all's royalin. Did I dedalize that is nothing passated in the stream? Litter the water. The offs I get make up still exist in black, if we under-relief this fostant. I brought a subliny take for this stoping Brett, steering completely to this kiggerly spotty. One about this very flawing orange will helps him a de sweeks, we have still a little mean promised. What I sletly resurrected, and the mumptold that, a nothing design. That will be telling if the decivicant sequence are not. Make sure the Menefidel walks the boast. To the commitment with an actually correctful askant. I focus this simple frentment that is wrong another, because in the chan joy and the delated one doesn't still unistly math. What I run again, what I actually still try to stop, not one thing and that one of them. I am actually complaining to the still humanese and tires in here the arts. I must take the stopen deputy of that Blaptems who hids a greely capturing the flaughter of a moment, whatever ever. I believe the simple can, that is, not all the newest. I imagine anything which not chakes in my Norvestra to appreciable manu. The first three records followed that order, though with suspicious speed. The fourth did not. Evan enlarged the final transfer. Payment file created, 9:21 a.m. Executive approval recorded, 9:14 a.m. He checked the time zones. Identical. He checked server drift. Under 1 second. He checked whether the file had been edited rather than created. The immutable storage record showed no earlier version. Julian's approval appeared 7 minutes before the final payment file existed. A signature could be stolen. A clock could be manipulated. But no legitimate approval could examine and authorize a payment that had not yet been created. Evan called Julian back. The CEO entered and stopped across the transparent evidence board, close enough to see, far enough to avoid looming over him. Tell me what I'm looking at, Julian said. Evan marked 2 points on the timeline. Your approval was logged here. The payment file came into existence 7 minutes later. Hope flickered across Julian's face, then vanished beneath discipline. So it clears me? No, it proves the official sequence is false. You could still have participated in creating the false record. Julian absorbed that without protest. What does it change? Everything about where I look next. Their eyes met through the pale timeline reflected in the glass. Evan became aware of Julian's stillness. Not passivity, but control deliberately held. Julian could have seized the flaw as salvation. Instead, he let Evan keep ownership of it. What do you need? Julian asked. A protected copy outside this building, the raw logs, certificate history, transfer records, and downstream payment notices. Julian slid his access card toward Evan, then remembered it was already sealed and withdrew his hand with the faintest trace of embarrassment. Evan nearly smiled. You froze your own access, he said. I was trying to be helpful. You were. I'll use the trustee's export key. They built 2 encrypted copies. Evan sent one through the fund's independent evidence portal, then placed the second drive in an anti-static case and locked it inside his document bag. A notice flashed on the downstream ledger before he closed it. One recipient company had already paid a security contractor called North Key Response. Evan captured the entry with the rest. Rain striped the headquarters windows when Voss summoned them to the boardroom. She listened as Evan explained the impossible sequence, her hands folded on the black glass table. A corrupted timestamp does not justify exporting confidential records, she said. It isn't one timestamp. 4 systems confirm the order. Then seal the audit here until our counsel reviews it. No, Evan said. Voss looked to Julian. You can still prevent an uncontrolled disclosure. Julian's answer was quiet. Mr. Hart's evidence remains independent. A pulse of trust moved through Evan, unwelcome but honest. Julian had just refused an easy chance to reclaim control. Evan closed his bag. The evidence is already preserved. I'm leaving through the secured garage. I'll accompany you, Julian said, then checked himself. If you consent, you may prefer separate transport. Evan considered the storm, the pressure to seal the audit, and the valuable drive at his side. You can walk with me. We travel separately after that. The underground level was nearly empty. Their footsteps echoed between concrete pillars as they approached the security gate. Evan heard the engine before he saw the car. A hard acceleration from the lower ramp where vehicles were required to slow. Headlights swung toward them. Move, Julian said. The car surged across the empty bays. Julian caught Evan by the upper arm and pulled him behind a pillar as the vehicle clipped Evan's abandoned document cart and sent it spinning. Julian released him the instant they reached cover. Are you hurt? No. Evan clutched the evidence bag against his chest. Barrier control. 10 meters left. I'll draw the driver's attention. You will not make yourself bait. Evan pulled the duplicate drive from his bag and pushed it into Julian's hand. Hold this. Stay behind the pillar. Julian obeyed. Evan crouched along the concrete divider, reached the emergency panel, and struck the red control. A steel barrier dropped across the exit lane. The car braked, reversed, and struck a parking stop. Its driver jumped out, face hidden by a rain hood, and fled through a service stairwell before the barrier finished attending. Something small skittered across the floor. Evan retrieved it with a clean evidence sleeve. It was an electronic access fob bearing North Key Response's Silver Wave emblem, the same contractor named in the downstream payment notice he had preserved minutes earlier. Julian stared at the sealed fob, then at Evan. One of the stolen accounts paid them. Yes, Evan said, hearing approaching security alarms above the rain. And someone just tried to make sure we never proved it. Detective Lena Ortiz arrived before corporate security finished deciding who controlled the garage. In a slate-gray trench coat darkened by rain, she took the evidence sleeve from Evan only after photographing it in his hand. You found the fob where? 2 meters behind the driver's door after the car stopped. I used a clean sleeve and touched nothing directly. Ortiz sealed the sleeve inside a numbered bag. Her square, observant face turned toward Julian. And the drive? Julian held it out on his palm. Mr. Hart gave it to me during the attack. I have not opened or connected it. Keep your hand still. Ortiz photographed that transfer too. When the drive was secured, she looked between them. This is now a criminal investigation. Attempted assault, theft of public funds, possible conspiracy. Neither Cross Meridian nor its board controls my chain of custody. Good, Evan said. Julian's gaze remained on him. I can arrange protection. No private team, Evan said. The refusal came sharper than he intended, but Julian only waited. Evan steadied his voice. Your company is still under examination, and North Cree is a security contractor. I want 2 officers or licensed escorts from separate units, both names disclosed, every contact logged. Ortiz gave a brief nod. I can authorize that. Julian did not argue. Then I withdraw my offer. The clean simplicity of it loosened something in Evan's chest. Julian had pulled him from a moving car, yet he still understood that saving someone once did not purchase authority over what happened next. You can accompany us to the audit room, Evan said. As a witness, not as protection. I understand the distinction. By the time they returned upstairs, Ortiz had posted 1 detective outside the forensic room and another at the elevator. Favin's duplicate evidence was already beyond the building, but someone had risked a car to stop him carrying it. That meant the thief feared not merely the records, but what the records could lead him to. He opened the downstream notices for the 4 $10 million transfers. Each recipient presented itself as a different clean energy supplier. A turbine logistics firm, a battery site consultant, a grid permitting company, and an engineering partnership. Their incorporation addresses were different. Their directors were different. Even their banks were different. Julian stood across the table while Ortiz watched from beside the door. They were designed to survive a superficial check, Evan said. 4 plausible invoices, 4 plausible vendors, 4 separate payments. But the banks sent settlement instructions after the money arrived. He placed 4 printed notices in parallel, then drew 1 line from each toward the same account number. Think of 4 houses with different street names. Every house has a mail slot, but behind the wall, all 4 slots empty into 1 locked room. The companies received $10 million each only on paper. Automatic sweep instructions moved every dollar into the same custody account. So the $40 million never truly separated, Ortiz said. Correct. That matters because one person did not need to control 4 companies. They only needed control of the room behind them. Julian leaned over 1 document, stopping before his hand crossed into Evan's arrangement. May I point to something? Evan noticed the question and the restraint behind it. Yes. This phrase, continuity reserve pending accelerated deployment. Julian's expression changed with recognition. It came from a confidential emergency financing proposal 18 months ago. The wording was deliberately unusual because counsel wanted the reserve distinguished from operating capital. Who received the proposal? Ortiz asked. 6 board members, legal counsel, Noah Bell, and me. Who controlled it? Evan asked. Julian's eyes met his. Eleanor Voss chaired the Emergency Financing Committee. The room seemed to narrow around her name. Evan studied the language rather than Julian's reaction. A copied phrase could show access, but access was not authorship. Did Voss prepare the proposal? She directed it, but so did I, in parts, and Noah reviewed compliance. Julian stepped back from the table. You should not treat my recognition as a conclusion. Verify the document history independently. You're declining to accuse the woman who tried to seal the evidence against you? I'm declining to replace her pressure with mine. Evan held his gaze a moment longer than the question required. Attraction was a dangerous word in an active investigation, but respect had already become impossible to deny. Then give Detective Ortiz the original repository location and no interpretation. Julian did exactly that. The repository showed that the distinctive phrase had first appeared in a memorandum uploaded under Voss's committee credentials. More importantly, the 4 recipient companies had been incorporated within 11 days of that upload. Evan searched their filing identifiers against municipal records, but the online archive showed only scanned certificates and missing amendment pages. Ortiz read over his shoulder. Missing because they were removed? Or never digitized? Either way, the city keeps paper originals. Evan checked the archive hours. It opens in 35 minutes. Julian glanced toward the rain paling against the glass. If I come, my presence may influence the clerk. If you stay, I lose the person who recognized the language. Evan closed his laptop. You come as a witness. You do not request records, speak for the company, or stand over my shoulder. Agreed. The city archive occupied an old stone building whose brass lamps made dawn feel warmer than it was. Ortiz's 2-person escort remained visible without crowding them. Evan presented his independent appointment letter, requested the 4 corporate files, and signed the access register while Julian waited several steps away. The archivist returned with 3 gray folders and an apology. The 4th is cross-indexed to a restricted custody filing. I'll need the catalog reference. Who applied the restriction? Evan asked. It predates our current system. There may be a reference in the amendment register. The register was a bound volume, its entries written by hand and later stamped with small catalog codes. Evan traced the dates until he found the Battery Consultant's First Amendment. It changed the company's settlement agent from its listed bank to a custody service called Meridian Harbor Trustees. Attached beneath it was a paper authorization bearing a second entity's embossed seal. Julian went very still. Evan angled the page under the lamp. The seal named Voss Family Office Holdings. Ortiz moved beside him, careful not to touch the paper. That connects the common destination to Eleanor Voss. It connects her family office to authority over the custody arrangement, Evan corrected. We still prove who exercised it, when, and how the certificate was used. Julian's composure tightened rather than broke. Noah warned me about a reserve structure. Evan looked up. When? 3 weeks before he died. He said one of the committee's contingency vehicles had no legitimate operating purpose. Julian's voice was quiet enough that the archive lamp seemed to hum around it. I asked whether money had moved. He said not yet. I told him to document the concern and bring it to the next risk meeting. And did he? He never reached it. His car left the road 2 days before the meeting. The review called it an accident. Julian stared at the amendment. I convinced myself that his warning had been preliminary because accepting anything else meant admitting I had dismissed him when he was asking me to act. That was a failure, Evan said. It was not permission for someone to kill him. No, but he deserved better from me. Julian's hand shifted on the table, then stopped well short of Evan's. May I offer you my hand? Nothing more. The request struck Evan with more force than an uninvited touch would have. He could say no without consequence. Julian had made that certain. Evan looked at the broad open palm between them, then placed his own hand into it. Julian's fingers closed gently. No dominance, no claim, only warmth held at the pressure Evan allowed. For several breaths they remained on opposite sides of the evidence, grief and suspicion still present. Neither man pretending contact could settle either. Then Evan withdrew. "I believe your regret. I have not cleared you." "I know," Julian said. "Thank you for both truths." The archivist returned, carrying a narrow request ledger. "Someone previously ordered the restricted file. Our rules allow investigators to review the request history." The entry was dated 9 days before Noah Bell's death. Beside his name was a catalog reference longer than the one in the amendment register. Evan copied it onto the retrieval form, and the archivist disappeared into the closed stacks. She came back with the missing folder and a small security still clipped to its request slip. In the image, Noah stood beneath the same brass lamps in his brown tweed jacket, studying the custody amendment with the concentration of a man who knew exactly what he had found. Evan compared the catalog code on Noah's slip with the code on the restricted folder. Every character matched, including the suffix identifying beneficial control records for the custody account. Noah wasn't raising a theoretical concern, Evan said. He had already found the hidden account. Ortiz's expression hardened as she secured the request slip for evidence. Julian released a slow, wounded breath. 9 days after Noah located the destination of the 40 million, he was dead. And now the same account had paid the contractor whose access fob lay sealed in Ortiz's custody. Ortiz's phone vibrated before the evidence bag was sealed. She listened for less than a minute, then looked at Evan. "Boss has called an emergency board conference. She says she has documentary proof that Julian controls the custody account." Julian did not reach for his own phone. "Then she had that proof before we found the account, or she created it after Noah did." "Either possibility matters," Evan said. He asked the archivist to preserve the restricted folder exactly as found, then photographed the binding, accession marks, and empty spaces around every inserted page. "Detective, can you arrange for the original to remain here under joint city and police custody?" Ortiz nodded. "And certified copies travel with me, not either of you." At headquarters, rain covered the boardroom windows in shifting silver. Leonora Voss waited at the far end of the black glass table, her silver brooch aligned precisely above the ivory silk of her blouse. A document rested beneath one hand. "Mr. Hart," she said, "you have spent valuable hours suggesting that my family office controls stolen public money. Before you damage more reputations, you should read the Beneficial Trust Declaration attached to Custody File Reference MH-7714-C. Evan stopped without looking at the document. The archivist had not spoken that reference aloud. Evan had copied it himself. Ortiz had secured the request slip, and Julian had remained too far away to see the suffix. "Where did you obtain that reference?" Voss's cool expression did not move. "From records available to the board." "No," Evan said. "The public index ends before the suffix. The full reference appears only on Noah Bell's unpublished request slip and inside the restricted file we opened this morning." For one sharp second, her fingers tightened on the paper. Then she pushed it toward him. "Read the substance instead of manufacturing drama." Evan photographed the document before touching it. The declaration named Julian as a future beneficiary of Meridian Harbor trustees entitled to the remaining assets upon termination of the custody arrangement. On its face, it transformed the trail. The 4 shell companies still swept $40 million into one account. Voss's family office still administered it. But Julian now appeared positioned to receive whatever remained. If accepted, the document could make Evan's defense of investigative independence look like personal favoritism toward a suspect. Julian read from where he stood, keeping his hands behind his back. Shock reached his eyes, but not his voice. I have never seen that declaration. Convenient, Voss said. Your signature approved the transfers, your trust receives the proceeds, and your accountant has repeatedly delayed the obvious finding. Evan is not my accountant. Julian's gaze stayed on Evan rather than Voss. He is independent, and he owes me nothing. Follow this wherever it goes. If it proves I lied, publish it and let the consequences destroy me. The words offered no command and no request for belief. That restraint steadied Evan more than reassurance could have. I will follow it, he said. Starting with the paper, not the accusation. Voss's mouth curved without warmth. You have until the emergency session tonight. I will ask the board to dismiss you for compromised judgment and refer Julian for immediate suspension. After she left, Julian remained across the table. Is the document change your view? It changes what I must prove. Evan slid the declaration into a protective sleeve. And she knew a reference she could only have learned from Noah, the restricted file, or someone monitoring us. You recorded her exact words? Evan touched the audio recorder in his waistcoat pocket. With notice posted at the entrance, as required. He met Julian's eyes. You told me to follow the evidence even if it destroys you. I need to know you meant it. I did. Julian's voice softened. But I would prefer that it not destroy you with me. The concern crossed the professional boundary without trying to erase it. Evan felt the answer in his chest before he allowed himself to speak. Then help me by staying away from the document examination. Trust your restraint enough to ask for more of it. You have it, Julian said, and left the room without once looking back at the alleged trust. At the archive, Ortiz arranged an independent document examiner and obtained the notarial registry while Evan compared the declaration with the bound filing record. The declaration claimed it had been executed 6 days before Noah's death, but the embossed notarial seal carried a serial number issued 22 days later, and the archive's intake receipt showed the amendment arriving the following morning. The comparison was as simple as a theater ticket printed before the show existed. Whatever date someone had typed on the front, the official seal pressed into it had not yet been manufactured on that date. So it was filed after Noah died and dressed to look older, Ortiz said. Yes. Evan placed the 3 dates in a row: the claimed execution, Noah's death, and the seal's actual issuance. Its purpose was not to move money. The custody account already existed. Its purpose was to create a future beneficiary who could be blamed if the account was discovered. Julian, Ortiz said, and because Noah had already found the account, the amendment had to appear older than his discovery. Evan glanced at Noah's security image. Voss knew what he had found. She prepared the frame after he could no longer contradict it. The archivist brought them one final box, requested under Ortiz's warrant: the city's offline disaster recovery ledger for Cross Meridian's public fund signing system. Its bound pages recorded emergency credential changes in case the live network failed or was altered. Evan found Julian's certificate entry at 2:06 a.m. on the night of the theft. It had been revoked and reissued through the board chair's emergency authority. The authorization code belonged to Eleanor Voss. 8 minutes later, the system displayed Julian's approval. 7 minutes after that, at 2:21, the final payment file came into existence. Ortiz leaned over the ledger. Explain what reissuing the certificate allowed her to do. She created a new digital signing key wearing Julian's name, Evan said. Like ordering a replacement office stamp without taking the old stamp from his desk. His devices could remain untouched while the substitute credential approved a placeholder. Then the payment record was altered to make that approval appear attached to a file that did not yet exist. And the offline ledger survived because it was outside the system she changed. Exactly. Evan's pulse accelerated, not from uncertainty, but from the danger of finally possessing a complete sequence. Voss did not merely benefit from the account. She acquired Julian's signing identity minutes before the theft and used it to build the impossible timestamp. His building access vanished while Ortiz was mirroring the ledger photographs to police evidence storage. The denial appeared first on his phone, followed by a formal notice from Voss. His appointment was suspended pending the emergency session. All company property was to be surrendered, and entry beyond the public lobby would constitute trespass. When they returned, Voss stood beyond the lobby gates with 2 security officers. Evan handed one officer his blank access card. Ortiz kept the sealed evidence case. Julian approached from the elevators, but stopped beside Evan rather than placing himself between Evan and security. "I can resign before the hearing," Julian said quietly. "The trustees may accept temporary control if my presence is the excuse Voss uses to freeze the fund." "No." Evan's answer came harder than he intended. "She forged a route from you to the money because she wanted every honest choice to look guilty. If you resign before the evidence is public, the frame chooses for you. I care more about protecting the fund than keeping my position." "So do I. That is why we prove what happened instead of offering her a sacrifice." The security officers withdrew at Voss's signal, leaving them beneath the storm-dark glass. Julian looked at Evan with an openness that made evasion feel less safe than truth. "My judgment is not clean where you are concerned. I admire you. I want time with you when this is over, if you choose it freely and if there is no professional imbalance between us." Evan let the admission settle between them. "I want that too." He kept a deliberate hand's breadth of distance, though every instinct urged him to close it. "But not tonight. Until the case is resolved, neither of us should have to wonder whether fear, gratitude, or suspicion made the decision." "Afterward," Julian said, "I will ask again. And afterward, I'll answer." The emergency session opened to city officials, fund trustees, employee representatives, and a public live stream Voss had demanded to demonstrate control. Ortiz had already supplied the clerk with notice that she would attend as an independent police witness. Evan's evidence existed in the archive, police storage, and a protected municipal server. Revoking one access card could no longer touch it. At the appointed minute, the boardroom doors opened. Evan entered through the rain-muted light, with Ortiz beside him and Julian several steps behind. At the far end of the table, Voss sat rigid beneath the cameras, committed to a hearing she could no longer seal, postpone, or control. The clerk had barely confirmed the live stream when Evan placed 4 sealed exhibits beneath the document camera. $40 million left the Clean Energy Fund in 4 transfers of $10 million each, he said. "Tonight I will show who controlled the act, who controlled the destination, and why the record naming Julian Cross cannot be true." Across the black glass table, Voss touched her silver brooch as if checking that every part of her remained precisely arranged. Julian took the seat assigned to him and left the center of the room to Evan. Evan displayed a simple timeline. "The system says Julian approved the final transfer at 2:14 a.m. The final payment file was created at 2:21. An approval cannot attach to a document 7 minutes before that document exists." He let the 2 times remain visible. "That inconsistency does not depend on anyone's memory, rank, or reputation. It is recorded by separate servers whose clocks were synchronized with the city treasury." Voss leaned toward her microphone. "Or Mr. Cross approved a template and had his accountant substitute the final file afterward." "I am not his accountant," Evan said. "And that explanation fails for the same reason. The approval record identifies the finished file by its unique digital fingerprint. Change even one recipient or one digit and the fingerprint changes. At 2:14, the system claimed to recognize the fingerprint of a file that would not be created until 2:21. A murmur passed through the employee gallery. Julian did not turn toward it. His dark eyes stayed on Evan, attentive without asking to be rescued. That trust carried weight precisely because Julian had surrendered the right to direct where Evan placed it. Evan opened the second exhibit. At 2:06, 8 minutes before the false approval appeared, Julian's signing certificate was revoked and replaced. The live system's administrative history was later altered, but the offline disaster recovery ledger retained the change. The replacement was authorized under the board chair's emergency power. He enlarged the photographed entry. The authorization code belongs to Eleanor Voss. Voss's composure tightened by a fraction. At Julian's request, he told me his certificate had failed. Then there should be a request, a fault notice, or a confirmation sent to his registered device. There is none. Evan looked directly at her. There is, however, a security recording showing his phone locked inside police evidence storage when the alleged confirmation was later generated. The replacement certificate was a second key cut in his name. It allowed someone else to sign without touching his devices. Someone else, Voss repeated. You still have not proved I used it. Then we follow the money. Evan replaced the timeline with 4 corporate diagrams stripped to their essentials. The transfers went to 4 companies with different names, banks, and stated purposes, but each company carried an automatic instruction. Upon receipt, sweep the entire balance into the same custody account. 4 doors, 1 corridor. He drew the paths together. All 40 million arrived in that account within 11 minutes. He showed the paper amendment found at the archive. The custody account was controlled through a management entity owned by Voss Family Office. Its authorization records permit Eleanor Voss to direct transfers personally. The later trust amendment naming Julian as a future beneficiary was backdated. It claims execution before Noah Bell's death, but its notarial seal was not issued until 22 days afterward. It was filed the next morning. Voss rose, black sleeves rigid at her sides. A family office administrator could have acted without my knowledge. Julian designed the theft, ordered me to replace his certificate, and arranged that trust because he expected to take control once public attention faded. Mr. Hart has become emotionally compromised by the man he was hired to investigate. Every camera shifted toward Evan and Julian. Julian's shoulders remained still, though Evan saw the protective impulse in the tension of his hands. He did not speak over Evan or reach for authority. He waited. The Reverend recognized the Fanic script, or the grast chaining the Anisby. My feelings are irrelevant to the timestamps, Evan said. That is why I mirrored every exhibit before acknowledging them, why Detective Ortiz holds the independent chain of custody, and why Julian had no access to my analysis. If my judgment is challenged, test the evidence. Do not substitute insinuation for it. For one suspended moment, Julian's gaze met his. There was gratitude in it, but also something steadier. Respect for the boundary Evan had defended, rather than disappointment that it existed. Evan turned back to Voss. And your claim that Julian secretly directed you fails because Noah Bell discovered the custody account before the theft was complete. Noah's archive photograph appeared beside his catalog request. In it, he wore his brown tweed jacket and looked patiently toward a clerk beyond the frame. Noah requested the ownership amendment and the custody account index 3 days before his fatal incident, Evan said. The catalog reference was never published, entered into cross-meridian systems, or disclosed to Julian. Yet during the earlier board meeting, Chair Voss named that reference before I did. Voss's face lost its stillness. Noah discussed his concerns with me. That proves nothing except that I listened to an employee Julian ignored. It proves you knew what he found. The account records prove what you did next. Evan brought up a final chain of payments. The custody account paid a security contractor 48 hours after Noah's death. The invoice called it Emergency Transport Consulting. The same contractors supplied the vehicle and temporary access credentials used in the parking attack against Julian and me. Ortiz stepped forward in her slate-gray trench coat and set a sealed evidence bag beneath the camera. Inside lay the fob dropped beside the security barrier. This credential was recovered at the scene and remained in police custody, she said. Its encrypted serial matches the contractor's issue register. Traffic cameras placed the contractor's vehicle near Noah Bell's route on the night of his fatal incident and inside Cross Meridian's garage during the attack on Mr. Hart. A contractor employee has identified Eleanor Voss as the person who approved both assignments. That statement is corroborated by payment records and access logs. You paid them to frighten Noah, Evan said, his voice quiet enough to make the room lean toward him. When he kept the archive appointment, the assignment changed. After I found the impossible timestamp, you used the same people to destroy the audit and make Julian's death look like a guilty man fleeing. Noah left the one thing you could not erase, an official request outside your systems. Voss reached for the tablet beside her. Ortiz moved between her and the door. Do not access that device. It is board property. It is evidence. Ortiz's tone remained level. Eleanor Voss, you are under arrest for financial theft, conspiracy, obstruction, and offenses arising from the death of Noah Bell and the parking garage attack. As Ortiz secured the tablet, the city treasurer's phone rang. He listened, then raised his hand toward the clerk. All participating banks confirmed the custody account and its linked accounts are frozen. No principal was dispersed beyond reversible internal movements. The complete $40 million is secured for return to the public Clean Energy Fund. Relief moved through the room like air returning after a sealed door opened. Voss looked toward Julian, perhaps expecting triumph she could condemn. He offered none. He looked at Noah's photograph instead. Evan gathered the exhibits only after the cameras recorded every seal intact. Outside the boardroom, Julian stopped several feet away. Are you all right? Ask me when the adrenaline stops. I will. Julian glanced toward the doors through which Ortiz had taken Voss. You cleared me without ever making me the center of the case. The fund was the center. Noah was part of the cost. You were a fact that had to be proved fairly. A faint, tired warmth reached Julian's face. That may be the kindest thing anyone has ever refused to do for me. By dawn, the trustees had accepted Julian's temporary return under independent supervision and offered Evan a 3-year oversight contract reporting directly to the municipal trustees, not to Julian, Cross Meridian, or its board. Evan signed only after adding public audit milestones and dual approval for every fund transfer. On the rooftop above the clearing city, he handed Julian a copy. Julian read the reporting clause first. I cannot assign your work, evaluate you, dismiss you, or change your compensation. Correct. Then I can ask without borrowing power from either of our positions. Julian folded the document, but did not close the distance between them. Would you consider a relationship with me? Yes, Evan said. Slowly, honestly, and with the understanding that disagreement is not disloyalty. I want exactly that. Julian's voice softened. May I kiss you? Yes, but let me. Evan crossed the space Julian had preserved, touched one hand to the lapel of his navy suit, and initiated the kiss. Julian received it without claiming more than Evan offered. When they parted, the sunrise caught the rain along the rooftop rail, and Julian rested his forehead lightly against Evan's, only after Evan nodded permission. Weeks later, The restored $40 million began funding its first community battery sites and municipal solar projects under the new controls. Noah's name appeared on the Independent Compliance Fellowship established by the trustees. After work, Evan met Julian on the rooftop with his own decisions made and his own authority intact. They stood side by side, hands linked, facing the bright city as equals, choosing accountability and each other without sacrificing either.